If you don't write your story and make the effort to write the story and get out there and put your head above the parapet, someone else will write it for you. I think I've always had a real issue with public speaking, and I've had to overcome it and go on course after course to get confidence to do it. And now I do it, and I actually don't mind it now. But if I hadn't written that story for me, because what I think is quite different to what a lot of other people think, what could have been written about me would be completely different. If you make the effort to write your story, no one else can rewrite that. So I just encourage every entrepreneur, you're very valuable, everyone's been where you are, but get your story out there because they're all so relevant. We need to hear every single entrepreneurial story to encourage every single other entrepreneur who's stuck where you are to go and do it. So it doesn't matter. We don't want to hear the big stories. We just want to hear the everyday stories of growth and difficulties and the vulnerabilities and the opennesses. So please write your story. Okay.
Sam, you are very welcome to the ScaleX Insider Podcast. Delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Delighted to be here, Brendan.
Yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You're an inspiring female founder, startup, scale up and sell up entrepreneur. I'm really looking forward to diving into your story today and indeed your wonderful book, The Secret Sauce. But you know very well, because we're on a very, very similar path. Our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So Sam, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
Scaling with purpose for me, I think, is firstly, it's an overarching theme, which for me is doing the right thing. And when I set out, when culture wasn't a word and, there were no 3-letter acronyms like ESG and, which just got all confusing. To me, when I set out in business, when I was very young, it was doing the right thing. And within finnCap, one of our big USPs was culture and changing the way culture works. So this overarching principle of doing the right thing, business does great things, but it has to do it the right way. And that summed up for me was it's people, caring about your clients, caring about everyone you touch, that you just do things in the right way. So that's a sort of my fundamental thing. And then probably more deep into that is your why. What are you really doing? And I think that's where purpose comes through for me. That's not just making money isn't a purpose. Having I want to double, treble and make X amount by when isn't a purpose. It's what is deep in here. What's your DNA? What's your why saying about what is the importance of what you're doing? What are you disrupting? What are you changing? And I think that on top of this overarching doing the right thing, your why, and that you are doing something that is changing lives every single day in your own way for the better is what business is all about, and scaling with purpose, that's what it is for me.
Oh, I love that. It's simple and profound, doing the right thing. It's just elegant, and we all get that, and it's so refreshing to hear this coming from a fellow finance professional who's professing that it's not about the money and it's not about the numbers. So Sam, for those who are not or may not be familiar with your wonderful startup, scale up and sell up story, can you give us the abridged version of finnCap?
Oh God, the abridged one. So it started, I was 24, I just left KPMG, and I was asked to go and set up a corporate finance division within a big wealth manager. So the wealth manager wasn't particularly heard of, but it was fairly big. And they wanted to start off this new division and they needed someone to do it. So I turned up, thought that was quite fun. And on day one, it literally was on a desk, a phone, me, and I had to work out what I was doing, which I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't know I was an entrepreneur, but I just knew I wanted to do something really different and work in a small company and get to sort of do my own thing and work in my own way. So we started growing that division. It was me, then it was me plus one, it was me plus two. We never got that big in that division, but over about 8 years, we were raising more money for companies, we were advising more companies, we were floating more businesses, and very much no marketing, head down, didn't really realize what was going on or how we were growing. When we looked up 8 years later, we said, God, we really love this and we really want to continue to grow. And how do we do it? Yeah, let's go and ask if they might give us some equity, because basically we haven't been paid a lot to do this for 8 years, but we've loved it. So we think we could start a business out of it. So, should we get some equity? They said no. You can't have equity in our top co. So we said, okay, let's buy it out. So we started the buyout process. They started off by offering us 10%, that they would have 90 and we could have 10 for me and all my team. So that probably wasn't quite the buyout I was thinking of. And 3 years later, we negotiated a buyout where it was 50-50. So we completed the management buyout in August 07 and became finnCap. So finnCap, everyone knows that's the investment bank that started in 07. But what they don't really know is actually it was 10 years in the making. It was 10 years in the making of doing the work, really iterating and working out what worked and loving small companies and working with entrepreneurs. And that was the point where we said, right, we'll go it alone. So we went it alone, we bought in, we were 50% owned by our team, very broad ownership. We had about £3.5 million of turnover at that time, and started on our growth journey with our USP of our difference is we care about clients more. We just care more because we believe SMEs are the brightest part of the economy. They're where the growth comes from. And I could not understand why they had the most junior team in investment banking and financial services. The SMEs always get the most junior team. It's like, what? Why? Because we should be putting all our best people on these companies to grow them. So that was our sort of premise of going, right, we are going to care about these clients more than anybody else because they're the most important. And we're going to put our marker in the sand and say, we are all about SMEs, come rain or shine, whatever market we're in, we're going for it. 2 weeks later, Northern Rock collapsed. So the sort of starter of, yay, we own 50% of it and we're getting going and we're going to create this great financial advisor and broker was slightly scuppered. And also I was 33, first job as a CEO, didn't know what I was doing again. This is a theme. Was a bit scary. But what it turned out to be was our massive opportunity because we recruited a lot of people from really big banks that would be made redundant because everyone exited small cap, and we accelerated our business plan by 5 years. 5-6 years later became the largest advisor and broker on the London stock market, on the AIM market. Started doing lots more bigger deals, working with lots more companies, and we just carried on from there. We grew organically with very little capital for pretty much 20 years. And then made an acquisition, bought Cavendish Corporate Finance, a very big and well-known M&A house, and incorporated that into our business using exactly the same principles of culture, putting those into the business that we acquired and grew that. And we built it to beyond 50 million of turnover. We IPO'd at the same time as we bought Cavendish. And we became a full service investment bank. So covering the capital markets, private raisings for debt and equity, this M&A piece where we were selling entrepreneurial businesses to all sorts of different buyers all over the world. And that was our sort of ending, or my ending, because I left there. Cavendish is now continued. finnCap has now become Cavendish. They bought a company called Senkos. I'm still the largest shareholder, but I stepped down 2.5 years ago. So that was my sort of 24 years building an investment bank for growth companies in the UK. And I loved it.
It's a phenomenal story. So much resonates in this. The fact I stepped into my first CEO role in 2007 at the age of 32. Something that you mentioned, there's lots of different things, but what really stands out to me is the fact that it took over a decade for you guys to get to 3.5 million.
Yep.
And beyond that, then what was the period? What, another 10 years to accelerate it to accelerate it then to 50 million.
Yep.
But it took that 10 years. What do you advise those aspirational scale-up leaders now in the context of actually thinking longer term, especially in a society where everything is instant? But I see this consistent trend in this taking a decade to really get off the ground, and then it's kind of another decade before you really see this hockey stick growth. What's your advice to those aspirational scalers in the context of this longer term thinking?
So I think building a business is it's a long-term game. Nothing happens quickly. And actually, I was looking at something earlier because I'm doing a big presentation tomorrow on this principle because I didn't realize that lots of people don't know it, but it's all around exponential growth. And the theory, and I know it because I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of businesses where I've raised money, and you see how numbers scale and the same things happen every time and the same patterns happen every time. That every business takes a long time to grow to that 1 to 3. It generally is a long time. Some people can take beyond 10 years to get there, to just get there, because you're doubling every time. So every time you see what works, you're just iterating. You're in that iterating stage. You're generally bootstrapping. If you're VC backed and going for it, it's different. But if you're in the iterating bootstrap stage, a long time to just work out what is that thing that's scaling. So wherever you are on that journey, some might be a few years, some might be 10 years, whatever it is fine. Once you are at that 1 to 3, where you say, okay, we think we're repeating this 3 million revenue every year. We sort of know what we're doing now. It's not a one-off. It's not a big client, one win, 1 year, smaller one next year, which is what happened to us in the first 5 years. We might hit 3 million, then go back to 1, then go back up to 2. Once we'd hit 3 million regularly, it's like, right, we've got a sustainable business now here. We've got more clients, we've got more retainers. We're not relying on that lumpy one-off fee. So now it's the time to scale. And I have seen many hundreds of businesses where they find that time to scale. It has to feel right. It has to feel right here. And everyone's right is different. So every entrepreneur has a personality of their own. They feel it at different times. When you're comfortable to properly scale can come at any point. But for me, it was probably that 8 years when I thought, we got to become this advisor. We've got to invest £500,000. Our next stage of growth is this, and it's big. And I can't do that just by reinvesting profits. I've got to go and raise some money. I've got to do something. And that was our push at the right time, and where I felt utterly comfortable. I wanted to go for it, where we said, okay, 3 is going to become 10. So, that 0 to 3 didn't feel weird in 8, 9 years. And 3 suddenly going, right, next target, next 3 years is 10. And we did it in 4 years, 3 to 10 in 4 years, the next 4 years. So it's just about when feels right. And the super scale moment, again, for me, that happened in 2016. I started thinking, right, we're around 20 million turnover. We've got some serious market share, probably 5%. I can probably get 10% market share, but at that point, probably quite hard to go anywhere beyond that. And at 10%, it's like, but we've got to keep growing. We can't just get to 10% and stop. So if you're constantly in that growth mindset, what became obvious was we've got to buy something. We need to acquire. This is now 20 years in, we got to buy something. The first time that we will acquire anything, all of our growth for 20 years was organic. And that again felt right. Big risk, but I knew I was ready for the risk. Would I have been ready even 3 years earlier? No, I wouldn't. So it's a timing game. It's a personal game. Building a business has many other things around it, particularly if you are an underrepresented founder, particularly if a female founder, where you might have a family coming into the mix and you might think, right, got to slow down here, got to speed up here. It's a very personal choice, but as long as your window is growth, as long as you think North Star, big vision, constantly grow that vision, constantly think scaling, you will continue to keep going and find that moment where you switch it up a notch and where you go into exponential growth.
How much of this, Sam, is actually making the decision to scale? And I mean, deciding in your own head that I'm going to do this, and ultimately this is going to require certain changes, but we've seen success along the way here, but actually I'm making the decision now that we're going to go for this exponentially. Something you share within your wonderful book. For those who are listening, you'll not be able to see me holding up Sam's book, The Secret Sauce, Super Scale Your Business and Empower Your Talent with Empathetic Leadership. I love this read, and I encourage you all to go out and grab a copy. There was a defining moment I sense in this book where you had a conversation in a coffee shop with a mentor, and he, it would seem to me, and I'm putting language in this, called out your limiting belief.
Yeah.
Can you share with our listeners just that piece and how pivotal that was in terms of your own thinking?
Yeah, it was an absolutely critical moment, because when I saw him, we were at the point we were around 17 million turnover, and we got a bit stuck. And it was the first time in our journey from 0 to 17 that we'd got stuck. We just kept going. We might have got a little bit up and down, but we plateaued a bit. So I was already thinking what to do. And so I'd met this CEO, and he was actually a ex-CEO of a very big bank. He'd just left Barclays Bank. So huge, billion-pound business, multi-billion-pound business. And I was just pleased that he wanted to talk to me. And we started talking about culture and investment banking. And he was very pro really good, positive cultures. And he understood what I was doing. So I grabbed a bit of his time when I came back to London from this trip. And we were talking about my plans. And for some reason, he just kept going into this. Okay, so why can't you get here? Why can't you get here? And maybe because he sees things in billions and I was seeing things in, just millions. He said, well, what, I don't understand what's going on here. He could clearly hear me sort of coming up with a limit that I had in my head. And I'd never told anyone this, but when I set up the business, or when I bought out the business, so we're about 3 million turnover then, when I'd set the target of 10 million, which was our next plan, in my head, I had this belief that I thought, for me to feel like a success, for me to build this into something great, I think 50 million is about the figure. I feel like building a 50 million pound business would be like, yes, I've done it. I'm a great entrepreneur. That it was just in my head, in the background, thinking, yeah, we're going to go for 10, but 50, I feel like I've done a really good job. Then I can pack up and go home and say, well done me. I've built this 50 million pound business. And I didn't mention it to anybody, nobody. And what had happened is we got to 10. In my mind, I'm still 50. We'd got to 17. In my mind, I was still 50. And he said, so where are you thinking you could get to? And I said, well, 50 million's like my end goal. That's my goal. I don't tell anybody. He said, but why do you think that? I said, well, I've always thought it from the beginning, 50. He said, that's your problem. He said, so let's just forget this 50. If you had limitless time and money, because my brain couldn't cope with this concept, just forget limited time and limited money. And he also said to me, if you're not even there, so let's just say it's past your lifetime, how big could you get this business? So I said, well, actually, Numis is like 200 million turnover at the moment. So I don't see why we couldn't do that. It might take 20 years. It might take longer. I probably wouldn't still be running it then, but don't see why it's possible. Not possible. And it said, okay, so that's the new target then. So why can't you be 200 million? Just don't need to put a time frame on it. This 50 million for you has become time framed. So I left this lunch and I was my brain just exploded, and it exploded so much I had to walk back to the city, which was like 3 or 4 miles or something. And I just kept pacing. What is he right? What am I doing? What, 200 million? Are you sure? Numis are really big. They're the market leader. Can we get that big? I'd never thought about it before that we could get to that 200. I thought 50 was where we were stopping. And by the time it took to get to my office, 2 hours later, say, I'd completely changed my mind. It's like, he is right. This 50 million is gone. It's now 200 million. And so the moment I walked back into my office, opened the doors, it's like, it's 200 million. Again, told no one that it was 50 and it just moved to 200. And that was the pivot where I moved beyond the 17, and where I realized was I was limiting myself, because I was 17, I was getting close to the 50 and I couldn't see beyond it. So I was not able to see opportunities that would get me past 50. I was only seeing opportunities that would get me to sort of quite close to it, which is going to be hard work getting from 17 to 50. As soon as I put 200 in my head, I think it was a matter of weeks later, I brought in new teams, opened new divisions. We started talking to Cavendish, which was the sell side house, the M&A house, because it was like, right, we need a new vertical. My whole window of growth completely opened in a different way. And very quickly after that, as we motored towards 50 million revenue, I mean, we went straight past 17 to 25, and then we were moving towards 50. My new outward project to the team was, right, we're going for 100 million now. And we called it Project Premiership. So we've been through these leagues and we're now in Project Premiership. We're now competing with the big guys, and we are out there, and that's our next plan. And that became realistic for them. 200 million was still in my head. I didn't tell them. But I think there's something in all of us entrepreneurs that there's a goal, which we tell everybody because it's believable and realistic, but quite challenging. And then there's our own mental sort of mission goal, which is out there, which you might not tell anybody. I didn't, because I think they thought I was mad enough as it was, let alone going, right, we're going to become this. That you are keeping it there. So you are thinking long enough term, you're seeing wide enough opportunities, you're opening that window of growth all the time, that suddenly opportunities arise. And that doesn't happen unless you think very big. And I had no idea about that until I very, very happily met Anthony, who, in half an hour just got me to remove it.
Oh, Sam, you've just given a masterclass on the very first principle of our 10x10 principle framework, our ScaleX 10 principle framework, the psyche piece. I mean, well, because I know you are familiar with the work of Sherry Coutu,
Yes.
who has established the Scale Up Institute, a previous guest on the podcast, and lack of ambition of the leader is cited as the single greatest impediment as to why SMEs don't achieve scale. Less than 1% in the UK currently achieving scale. And this lack of ambition can be translated as really the limiting beliefs that people put in themselves, either ignorance, I don't know how, and we're always guilty as entrepreneurs of wanting to know how, getting caught up in
Yes.
if I can't see all the steps to do this, then it can't be done, whether we say that explicitly or it's subconscious. And the second piece is that fear, fear of the judgment. I'm not going to disclose this to anybody because they're going to think I'm mad, but there was a fundamental shift for you that day. How do you frame this now when you're speaking with other entrepreneurs? So what I've heard is the challenge, number one, why can't you? And your brain then immediately goes to the reasons why you can't. Yours typically were two, well, I don't have the time, because you've got this time frame in which you want to achieve it. And, I may not have the capital resource, I don't have the money. When those were both removed in terms of, well, forget about the time, because this doesn't have to be within your lifetime. And let's say you had the Black MasterCard with an unlimited amount in that. Well, then, what would you do now? And it immediately got you to think about others who have already done this. Is there a way that's what I've heard, is there a way that you frame this when you're having conversations with other entrepreneurs to kind of lift the lid on possible limiting beliefs, which are couched in lots of other things? I can't get the people, I can't get the money, now's not the time, look at the inflation risk, oh goodness, Donald Trump's gone and done this. So we hear all of this stuff, but ultimately when you strip it all back, it's all noise for something that's actually deeper and more subconscious within the entrepreneur. Does that resonate, and how do you frame conversations with entrepreneurs now?
So it's quite interesting, because if you think of my investment banking career, which was most of my 24-year career, I was coming across people who I think had already got the memo. They already knew that this exponential journey was happening. So every time I saw something, someone might not quite hit their plans, but it was just ingrained. It became in our DNA that this is how businesses grow. And what was fascinating is when I launched the SuperScalers last September, which is a community for underrepresented founders who've got to 1 million but want to superscale. We are trying to collapse that time. We had a really amazing uptake. So December, I had to get everyone together. So I was like, right, what should I talk about? So it went a bit bonkers and a bit ahead of where I thought it would be. So I put together an event very last minute around the growth mindset. And I chatted with my coach, who's been my coach since 15 million revenue of 10 years. And we just chatted about this growth journey and exponential growth. And my three sort of top bits of advice as to how you should look at scale and ambition is you think minimum one doubling journey ahead, wherever you are. So, if you're at 500,000, getting from 500,000 to 1 million is a big deal. It's hard. If you're at 100,000, getting to 200,000 is really hard. But if you're at 5 million, you need to be going for 10 million, like minimum. And there were women on this call that it's like I'd said something that was like this mystery box that had been opened of how to grow companies. And it was fascinating because they weren't aware of it. And, a lot of entrepreneurs are sitting there with no network. They don't know anyone. They're just, getting on with it and finding it very hard. And if you don't know other entrepreneurs and you haven't seen these journeys and you haven't looked at financials and seen what happens around the scaling journey, why would you ever know? So I had people thinking you go from 10 million to 11 million or 3 million to 3.5 million. So if you don't think at least one doubling journey ahead, you'll never get there because you won't plan for that. So my advice to them was always think minimum one doubling journey ahead. That's the minimum. Plan for 2 doubling journeys ahead. So you're looking 2 doubling journeys out and thinking, what's the team I need then? So you don't need to hire them today, but you need to think in your head, right, 2 doubling journeys time. What does that look like? And you start to, in your head, think, would that person get to there? Or is that person going to probably max out there? And therefore, the next person I hire will probably need to take me through to there. It's all those things that are going in your head all the time that if you don't think one doubling journey and plan for 2 doubling journeys, you're just not going to be in the space to do it. It's not going to happen. And then I think this is what totally blew their mind was the last one is you need to think your big vision needs to be 10 doubling journeys time. So you've got to 1 exit, 2 exit to plan and 10 exit in your, when you're at home and you're wandering around thinking, this could be great. You don't have to know how you're going to execute it. And that's the big thing. Actually, it should be so big that you've got no idea. But that's how far you need to think in your head towards ambition. And that's what I'm now trying to distill it down to when I talk to people. And I'm going out talking to a lot of entrepreneurs now because I've realized, how do people not know this? How did I not realize that people didn't know this? But is this the secret to the scaling journey, where in the US they scale much faster? It takes them on average 10 years to get to 10 million, and we're taking 17 years, or whatever. We're sort of taking double the time to scale, and we're failing. We have higher dropout rates along the way. Why is that? And is it just ambition? And my personal belief, and it's only anecdotal from talking to lots of people, is that this mindset, the psyche, you call it, the ambition, is the number one thing. And if I can distill it to just think 1 doubling journey ahead, plan for 2, think for 10, that is a really good place to start. And it works wherever you are. If you're 50 grand and you've just started setting up, 50 grand getting to 100 grand is an amazing achievement. But alternatively, if you're at 25 million, you need to think 50 million. And that is how businesses grow. They get to 50 and they go to 100. They go from 100 to 200. They go from 200 to 400. And then there's suddenly a billion. So these journeys take the same amount of time and effort. So I just really hope people don't stop at the million, because they do, because it's so hard, because you've been on so many doubling journeys and you can see it's knackering. You got to 1 million, you've doubled so many times, saying, oh my God, this is, but you think you've done the easy bit. You've done the hard bit. Now the easy bit is you go 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and suddenly you're a 30 million pound business. Well, and it took you, a third of the time. So that's what I'd love to encourage people is just keep going, because it just becomes easier and the theory of exponential growth kicks right in.
There's a mic drop right there, Sam. I think we can just wrap up the podcast. I mean...
Have I stunned you?
Only because you've just you've just wrapped up everything that we speak about in relation to the psyche. You're either going to empower your scaling journey or disempower your scaling
Yep.
journey with how you think about it. And I love the frame you've given people there. This is really important. So what I've just noted, the first doubling is you're thinking in detail about this. The second one, you should be planning for it.
Yep.
And the third, which is 10x, is the one that you envision. That's the
Yes.
one. That's your moonshot. That's the one your North Star, as you've referenced earlier. So think, plan, envision, and that's just so profound. So thank you for that. I wasn't expecting to actually unlock that today, and that's just an absolute gem. So,
But you know what? I wouldn't have unlocked it unless I'd started this great community that then I got all these women in a room to talk about mindset, just thinking it was a filler. It was like a starter, get to know me. It was only because they were so unaware of it and it was so transformational for them. I had people saying I was going about to give up my business and now I'm not. It was, and that was an hour and a half session. And when you do that, you think, right, I need to write this down. So, for 50 years, I did not think this was something people didn't know. And now I do. Now we can tell everyone.
Likewise. And we're just about to release a wonderful insight to all of this, actually. And, it'll be tomorrow in the context of when we're recording here, but it'll already be released to really support people with understanding the importance of psyche. I think mindset is talked about so much. A previous guest suggested that it's almost like the fish swimming in water. We've heard about it so often that we kind of, there's that mindset thing, but how do we really do this? You're going, no, you're missing the point here. This is so fundamental to not only scaling professionally, but scaling personally, I feel, in terms of understanding what your 10x life looks like. So we're going to have a 10x business, but what does your 10x life look like? Because there's no one coming to save you here. There's no one who's going to design this wonderful business for you. There's no one, whenever you have 10 minutes and you want to grab a coffee, they're waiting out the door. Like Anthony was kindly supporting you, but there's no one there who's going to proactively come to you and say, I've got a wonderful 10x vision of your business, and when you've got a moment, I'd like to talk it through with you. It's really important that as leaders, as entrepreneurs, that you take the time to really become aware of your own limitations, the language that you're telling yourself, the belief that you hold around what growth looks like. I hear it all the time. It's really hard. I can't get the people. Yeah, the time's not right. All of those good things. So you've described that so eloquently. I would love to do a little mini masterclass on the 6 E's, the secret sauce, as you described, the E ingredients of scaling, if you would. So we've got the 10 P's, you've got the 6 E's. Either way you look at this, these are frameworks to support you, the listener, with your scaling journey. So Sam, let's kick off. What is our first E here?
So first E is excitement. And as it probably suggests, it is the first piece of vision. So for me, excitement is the most important bit. It's the start. It has to have ambition behind it. It has to have growth mindset behind it. But it is, how do you excite your team? How can you make the vision so exciting that everyone's behind it? Is it big enough? Is it realistic? It can't be too big, because then people might think you're crazy and not going to achieve it. But is that vision utterly understandable? And can you relate that vision to everybody in the business? So you've got to excite them, but they've got to understand what it is, and they've got to get totally behind it. So it's the storytelling, how do you bring it to life? I call it, because I also found out very recently I was dyslexic because my daughter was, and I suddenly thought, oh, does not everyone else think like visually like this? I suddenly realized, when I see the business, and this happens to me with anyone's business, not just my own, I just have this vision. I can't write it down. It's just like this picture that's painted in my head. I see it in bright colors. I see everything about this scaling journey. It just pops up in my head. And a lot of entrepreneurs relate to that because a lot of them are very visual. And a lot of them have neurodiversity as well. So, it's even more visual.
I've interviewed so many of them on the show,
Yes.
Sam. You wouldn't believe how many successful entrepreneurs are neurodivergent. So.
Yeah. But what we don't know, because no one told us, is no one else thinks like that. So lots of people in your business don't see the vision. So what you've got to do is say, right, this is my vision. I see it in bright lights, rainbow colors. How do you paint the picture that the vision comes to life for everybody? So it's not just a boring set of words on a page, and it's just not a one strapline mission. How do you bring the whole thing to life and make it rainbow colored and exciting and relatable to every single person in your team? And that is important, that it is not just your front office people, your senior leaders, it's reception, it's your IT team. Absolutely everybody we would paint the picture for. And you might have to create quite a lot of hard work about that vision might be relatable over here in this way to this group and relatable to this group differently. And you're painting different pictures. But that was my overarching. If you do that and you do it well and you spend the time relating everybody to this exciting vision and paint the picture as best you can, everyone then starts to work towards a goal. And you start to get this super scale growth. You start to build the culture that scales I talk about in the book, which is everyone's on that boat, is going faster. If they get the vision, you're sort of most of the way there. So I'd say that's by far the most important E in my 6 E's.
Yeah, again, completely agree. The first phase of our own ScaleX framework is the inspire phase, where the second principle is purpose and vision. Really inspire people about where you're going and why you're going there, and it's just so affirming to hear that's your experience. So we've excited them.
Yep.
What's our next ingredient for scaling success?
So then we go into enroll, and what enroll about is, yes, you've got a vision, it's really exciting, but how do you absolutely enroll each one of your team in their own ways, financially and emotionally, into that vision? So it's more detail. It's about financials is very much salary, bonus, tying KPIs into it. So there's a financial connection, which can also come with equity, which I'm a massive fan of, and we did that. So financial connection is one thing. Emotional connection is another, which starts the day you interview that person. It actually can start before with your message about what's out there, but you emotionally start connecting when you meet someone. It's then, how do you run your recruitment process? How do you then, once you've hired someone, run that induction process? How do you make someone feel utterly emotionally connected? And that is about the little things. It's about the little things that matter. So we just adapted our process of induction all the time to make it so personal that there'd be points where I'd be writing a personal letter, before they joined. I'm so excited to see you. This is what I think qualities you'll bring. It's going to be great. This is what we're going to work on. I'd get them all excited. We'd send them a load of, gifts and things to get them going, and just silly things. And that would start on the first day. It'd be like they'd have one meeting with me. They'd get taken out for lunch. Everything was, for the first 90 days, planned. So you would be utterly emotionally connected with what we were doing. And then that continued with weekly updates, which would constantly connect back to the vision. It was all about that emotional tie-in, as why is someone coming to work above and beyond their salary? Why are they bothering to be here? And how do I make them be the best version of themselves? And if I could tie in the financial and emotional connection, that's when it would be like magic. If you could get someone with equity whose KPIs on the equity vesting were exactly around the vision, so they knew exactly why they were doing it, and that meant something to them. They were emotionally connected to the vision. They understood why their role connected to the overall. You couldn't get a more productive, excited person who was going to grow their business on their own, even if no one else was growing it. So enrolling them, it's not just you can't just say a lovely vision. You've got to get people attached to that vision, I think, emotionally and financially.
Sam, tell me about the I love equity piece because you will know, and certainly in this part of the world across the water, that the vast majority of SMEs are family owned, and the very thought of actually giving anything away is just a paradigm shift too far. So, whilst it might be common, and again, the environment that you are in, you would have witnessed this all of the time in terms of share option plans, ESOPs, all that good stuff. So it just became part of your language and felt probably like a very natural thing to do. Sorry, I'm making assumptions here, but tell me about your experience of sharing equity with team members, and maybe just dive into that a little bit further in terms of how far did you go with the equity share?
Okay. So in our industry, in financial services, you might have an option scheme for senior leaders, but you would not have broad spread equity ownership. That was, it probably was as bad as what you were saying. You'd have senior management who would own a lot of the business. So that was a normal structure, that the CEO would own most, the next senior level down might own a bit more, and everybody else might share 5%. Yeah, that's how it worked. What I wanted to do to differentiate culture and really have proper alignment was to say, okay, we're going to split this. So our first 50%, when we did the first buyout, got split. So I had 9%, and then it went down, towards the smaller numbers, but every single person had equity. And then when we did the second buyout, 3 years later, we bought out JM Finn's 50% when we were recruiting more people and we wanted more equity back. And what I did then was completely different. And I think my chairman did think it was a risk and thought I might have lost the plot. But what I wanted to do is say, like, this is my chance to show we're not like everybody else. So I'm going to take a bit of a risk. So what I did when we had the 50% available, I had in one room, everyone would come in individually and I'd say, right, we're buying out this 50%. I'd like it to be split completely equally. So everyone has the right to buy up this 50 grand's worth of shares. So know that I don't know anything about your personal circumstances. So I've arranged for our bank to be in the next door room. So you go and see them if you want. I don't mind if you don't, you can take nothing, but I want everyone to have equal chance to own this business. So I did that with every single person. They came in. I don't know still if they went next door or not to the bank, but what happened, so I had to raise 2.5 million within a matter of days to buy out our parent company, because it was quite a tricky buyout by the time I'd got them to agree to do it. So we had a couple of days to go, right, we're going to raise 2.5 million. I was running around the city thinking I'm going to have to raise most of this myself. So I'd said, okay, this is available to everybody. Whatever you don't want, I will go and raise from someone else. What happened the next day, they'd gone off to HSBC. I had indications for pretty much the whole lot. I think it was 2.3 from the team, the whole lot. And what happened was when we got the shareholder structure on a piece of paper and said, okay, if I'd said everyone can have it pro rata, so I will allow myself 10%, I'll buy 10%, my chairman, he can have 10%, and then the next senior part, you can have 5%, and you over there can have, 0.0001. That isn't that exciting, that doesn't make you feel included. What we did was said, you can all have it. And if you can get the financing, great, we're all in this together. Not everyone could take it up. Some people surprised us in different ways, but generally everyone got what they wanted. So I still got my 10%. Some people took up a bit more. Some people borrowed money off their parents. Some people, I don't know how they found the money, but some people took their whole £50,000 up. And what that meant at the end of it was, it wasn't the overall shareholding structure. It was the fact that we had included them and asked them. And I always say to people when they talk about fundraising, have you ever thought about asking your team? Because quite often your team are able to come up with money because they believe in your vision. And so where you're thinking, God, I need to raise 200 grand to get to the next stage and I'm bootstrapping. Actually, if you talk to your team and provide some banking facilities, and we were lucky our bank secured the loan on the shares, but you don't know what people are going to do. If they believe in it, all sorts of weird things happen. So that's what changed for us. It wasn't just the matter of equity, it's the way we did it. So I would say similar to, those SMEs who are thinking, I don't want to lose control, because I didn't want to only have 1%. That would have been a bit of a disaster. It's like, I'm the CEO and I'm the founder and I've got 1%. I've given all my shares away. So it could have gone quite badly wrong. But it was the principle. So for those SMEs, I'd say, look, you've got to think about how you include people financially. So is that just saying, look, I'm going to put a save as you earn scheme. So you can come in as a discount. You can put up to £500 a month in and we'll allocate this amount, 5%, but we're just trying to make you able to get some really cheap shares so you can make some money. At that point, people don't care about the percentage. They don't even understand the percentage. They're just thinking, oh, you want me to be involved. That's so exciting. You want to try and make me part of this. So it is the giving away, yes, but it's not the amount. It's the way you do it and how you make people feel part of that journey. So I would encourage everyone, I wouldn't recommend anyone did what I did, because that was a bit punchy, but I needed to do it because our whole industry was known, and I think someone had just done it, the year before. They take all the shares, the top team take all the shares, and everybody else is left with nothing, and that's what happens in banking.
Sam,
I wanted to do that different.
It's absolute genius. It is really genius to have a funding requirement of 2.5 million, to think the way you've thought, to pitch that to 50 of your team members. Again, even a limiting belief that as I'm saying this,
yes,
that I would put on myself is that where the hell will, Bill, who's just got married, who's, trying to scrape together to buy his house, why would we even pitch this to them? Already you would have that limiting belief put on you before you would even enter into this. I just think it's genius. So well done you. The 30, in the interest of time, because this is just wonderful.
We'll speed up. So engagement is the 30, and actually it's not totally dissimilar to the enrollment. This is about how you include people. This is about how you listen and how you ask. So it's all about the feeling of belonging. If you wanted to put inclusive culture somewhere, this all falls in with engagement. So my theory is, if everyone feels like they belong, if everyone's happier, they're more productive, they grow, and the whole boat starts rowing faster. So it's about the little things. It's about the collaboration. It's about ideas coming from everywhere. It is just about creating a lovely culture where people are listened to. So like, the example of if you don't ask, you don't know. Everything I found about culture over those 20 years was, you just ask, you create the forums, you ask the questions, you're bothered to care. It doesn't matter that you don't do all the things that people ask. It doesn't matter. It matters that you are interested enough and care enough to ask someone's opinion. And that is sort of a very summary version of that chapter, but work on the culture. But it really is just about listening and creating that culture that's flat structure, but you are bothered to make the time to go and listen, and people then feel included.
Makes complete sense. Again, people will be hearing this. This won't be the first time they've heard that, but what I say is, knowledge isn't power. It's the application of knowledge that is power. So it's really listening intently to what Sam's saying here and taking the opportunity to go and apply something. Just if you could only take away one thing from this podcast, apply something that might just be the fact that you haven't engaged your people recently, you haven't asked them how they are, you haven't asked how we could make this business better in terms of accelerate our progress against our vision. Just asking people how they are, why they're inspired by this business, how we could make this business better, and invite them into that conversation again is so powerful. People want to be listened to, they want to be heard. The fourth E for success.
So then we've got energy. Now this is probably the shortest one. It's the fizz factor. It's what makes people excited to come in the morning. So you've got them bought into the vision. They're enrolled, they're engaged, they've got this lovely inclusive culture, but making it fun. For me, business is fun, and coming to work should be fun. And how do you dial up that fun factor? So for us, it was celebrating every single thing. We'd celebrate everything. We'd have a Friday update, which was just celebrating the best of everything we did. And someone different would write it each week, and it became funny, and people's personalities are out there. And it was just those really little things that, what makes it fun for people. So that is important, particularly when things aren't going so well. So it's easy to be fun when you're winning clients all over the place and you're going through a growth spurt, and people are really excited about it. It's not so fun when things are bad. You've just lost a client. You've just lost 3 pitches in a row. Something's gone wrong with COVID and with what's happening now in the world. Who knows any given day what's going to happen to your business. It's going through those times when your people are bit down and finding it difficult to find the fizz factor. And what I found is that's when you need to dial it up. So when everyone's feeling really despondent, for us, when stock markets crashed, I remember being abroad when the stock market crashed once, and we just had to go on the phone and sell a story. It's like, this is awful, but we're going to get through it because there are opportunities here. And this is how we're going to help companies. And we're going to go out because they're not going to know what's happening. And we need to talk to them and really, keep them motivated to keep going while everything's going wrong and their share prices are falling. So you can create a buzz and excitement and energy in any scenario. And what companies, I think, forget is when it's bad, and when you are feeling awful, when you're sitting there, at home going, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? You've got to be like that swan, everything's flapping underneath, but on the surface, you're like, it's fine. You're calm, you're cool, you're collected. It's great. You're always looking ahead. You're always looking to that bigger vision, right? This is just a bump, but we're going to get here. So you've got to put the fizz factor in. And the only thing I would say, which is a part of that chapter, is it is exhausting. And what CEOs forget is when you're doing this fizz factor and this energy piece right, it is like an elite sport. You've got to have a break. So especially when times are tough and you're giving it everything and you're really creating the energy, you've got to find energy for you. So there's a little bit at the end about really working with yourself and self-care, because it takes more out of you than you ever think it does.
Let me ask about that, because again, you're speaking my language here. I always say to our community, think of CEO not as Chief Executive Officer, which is an old military term, which I hate. It is suggestions of hierarchy and command, but actually think of CEO, if we're going to keep that title, as Chief Energy Officer.
Yes.
That there is so much that's outside of your control in the context of scaling, but actually your energy is entirely within your control. Can you share with our listeners, and especially those female listeners, Sam, who, let's call it as it is, you guys, I'm married with 3 kids, and I know who, when we were on our scaling journey, who carried the brunt of the parenting, the lifts to their sports outside of school, the parent meetings, the meals. Females carry so much. What did you do as a founder and scaling leader, whilst still being a parent, to manage your energy? What were some of the kind of the non-negotiables for you that tapped up your energy batteries?
So the biggest thing, and this was pre having EFA and post, was getting that brain space, like finding the clarity of thought. And I know everyone's different, but for me, was getting on a plane, going for a very long walk, like traveling. If I go somewhere, a switch off, that was when you couldn't get internet on a plane, which now you can. But I would have the plane journey and have my little notebook, and I said, oh my God, no one's calling me. I can sort of relax. And wherever I was, because I was somewhere different, I would think differently. It seemed to just kick in another part of the creative brain. And I would just come back with loads of ideas. In fact, people used to go mad when I go on holiday. It's like, what is she going to come back with now? But I used to love it because it would give me that utter clarity where I could go away and think walking, sport for me, do it. Cooking for me does it. I love just cooking. I get totally into the food, anything that totally switches my brain off. So I've learned, and I've been very bad at this over the years because I've had many different times where I've had absolute burnout beyond what is healthy. So I've got much better at it. And I know the warning signs now. I pick up the warning signs and say, right, you need 2 days on your own. No, non-negotiable, go away. And those 2 days I get fired up again. So I would say it is exactly like being an extreme sports person. You go and run the race, and then you have to go and get in the ice bath and, have a couple of days where you're just lying down. It is like that. And if you don't take the regular breaks, sometimes it can be the odd day, you do really come a cropper. So that for me is just take the space. And then when I had EFA, I mean, that was a whole another thing. But the only thing I could do with that was to get support, and as much support and help as I possibly could, to make the difficult parts of the business work. If I knew I was going into an intense period, I would just get people in to help me.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we're siblings from another mother, Sam, because again, loved the plane journeys, loved the fact that you couldn't get Wi-Fi, loathe the fact that you can get Wi-Fi now because now you know that there isn't the same sanctity in that space. But literally being 35,000 feet in the air changed the environment, and for me, changed the way I thought. So like, there's very few times when you're when the environment is inducing you to stay in a seat and to sit for 5, 6, 7 hours, depending on where you're traveling to. It's a wonderful time to really allow you to unknot and to rethink and to really align with the bigger vision. So it resonates so strongly. Our penultimate E.
So then we go into elevate. Now, elevate and exit, that's all really about the people and the growth journey. So elevate for me is, how do you get your sort of store of future leaders, your superstars? How do you know who they are? How do you find them? And how do you promote them, elevate them as soon as you possibly can? And for us, that was massively powerful. It's finding that bank of superstars, constantly working on who's going to be in that position. So again, that only comes when you're thinking doubling journeys ahead, because you recruit someone at very early stage that you think they are very talented. They seem to be doing something really well. Let's put them in this position. Actually, maybe they could go and run a division in 3 years. So constantly thinking about where you can put people. And the biggest mistake I've made and I've seen other people make is, if you've got a superstar, tell them that they're a superstar. Just by the fact of you saying, I think you're amazing, I think you could do great things here, I don't know when, but I'm going to accelerate you through and we're going to put you on a fast track program. Just saying that, oh my God, you'll get loyalty. They'll probably speed up. They'll probably go and learn things that they wouldn't have otherwise learned. So tell them that they are them, and then put them in a group that's a bit different to everybody else. There is a future leaders group, because you never know on your growth journey when you need them. So if you don't have that bank ready to go, someone can leave. You've got someone who might be a bit early, but they can slot in and you give them some training. You might have suddenly 3 more clients come in and you're busy, and you can create a new division and they go and run it. Those people might even come up with ideas that can create a whole new division because they're looking at things in a different way. And with AI now, you see it everywhere. It's the youngsters who are going, you could disrupt that process. Why can't we do that really quickly? Well, if you don't know who those future leaders are and you're not talking to them and you don't give them the space and opportunity to come through and shine and tell you their ideas and implement them, you don't know. So elevating is the fastest way you can scale, using people that you have hired because they are just a cultural fit, and they are the best employees you could ever get because you have them at ground zero.
Completely agree. Again, in our previous business, when we scaled that to across the globe, across 6 continents, actually, we created our Future Leaders Academy for that very reason. You've put wonderful language around the reason why we were doing what we were doing. You've just articulated it very, very eloquently. The the fact that actually exponential growth and the difference between, for me, between scaling and growing's doing more with more effort, more hours,
Yeah.
more money. Scaling's doing more, but doing it differently and doing it with leverage. And one of the greatest levers you have is the unlocked potential within your people. And
Yep.
just tapping into that, as you describe, in terms of elevating those people in the context of certainly your double and your 10x vision, so critically important. So the final ingredient to
So the
successful scaling.
final is exit. So this is,
Oh,
this is
no,
the
it's all
shortest
over.
one, because this is a little bit sad, this one. But I've got a happy side to it, is that, in the growth journey, in this scaling journey, as well as elevating the great people, if you're looking at these doubling journeys ahead, unfortunately, not everyone is going to make it. And you have to sort of come to terms with that not everyone is going to make the whole journey, because if you are scaling, what was good there is not quite right for what you need here. So the nicest way you can do that, and you have to do it nicely, in my view, if you want to have a great culture, is to make sure you know when it's going to happen. You can plan it in your head, because you know probably when someone is not going to be quite right for the business, and you can do it well. You can either move them to the side, move them to a different role, start to talk about the skill sets that are required at that stage. You can do it as nicely as you possibly can. And what I always say in this chapter is, look, it's always difficult. But if you think of all your employees that ever exited your business, that they are one day potential alumni, that is the best way to think of it. People can do this very badly. Most people hate it. I don't know anyone who enjoys this. Otherwise, it'd probably be a bit of an odd person. But yeah, it's horrible. But if you think 2 years, 3 years down the line, are they going to be an alumni? Are they going to recommend you? What are they going to say about your business? If someone says, shall I work for them or shall I work for her? What would you say? You want them to be saying as many nice things as possible. You can't always get it right, but alumni are important. And we had many, many corporate financiers who would go off for all sorts of reasons and come back as clients. Somewhere along the line, they'd reappear as clients, and it would almost, once you got over the difficulties, they would still feel like family. And there was something really important about that. So I'd say, do exits in the nicest way. Do not hold off, because exits are utterly key to growth. You've got to get them right. You've got to make the painful decisions, but do them well and think about your alumni. And the very last piece is constantly have your own eye on the door, where most people think about succession for themselves far too late. Think about it. It's a very stressful period. Having done it, it was probably the worst things I had to go through, because your business is your baby, isn't it? It's your DNA. It's something you've built, but you have to leave at the right time. And that takes thinking about successor, thinking about what's right for the business. Is there a different role for you? Is it a chair role? Is it an investor role? Is it a NED role? Is it you bring in an MD? A lot of people stay as CEO, but bring in an MD to do the day-to-day. Your own exit from the business, even if it's not a full exit, your exit from that key role that you might have started as founder is fundamentally important to get right for you and for the business. So that's my last E. Not too sad, was it? Not too bad.
Yeah, it's I suppose in the metaphor of the recipe, it's inevitable that not all of the ingredients are going to be right at the right time in the context of what you're cooking, and you're always you're creating and with this journey, you're adding things in and then go, oh no, I've added too much, or I haven't added enough, or I need to add something else. And it's very much trial and error, as much as that sounds harsh, but the recipe is as much as we want to give this, the 10 Ps and the 6 Es, those are frameworks, those are lenses by which you can really navigate this scaling journey. But in the context of your own business, in your industry, serving your clients, you're going to have to add and take away different ingredients, bring in something new, take out something, or maybe neutralize something that was there. What I'm hearing in all of this is be really compassionate. Understand that the journey that you want to go on isn't the journey that everyone else who started with you wants to go on. Have that, be cognizant of that, be aware of that, have that conversation early. And as much as it is sad, it's an inevitability of the scaling journey. I used to take these things very personal, and that wasn't good for anyone. When you recognize that ultimately we will all exit our business, whether that is planned or otherwise, we are all exiting this business because we're all exiting this world at some point in time. So an exit is an inevitability. Whether you plan for it or not is another thing. What I'm hearing from you, Sam, and certainly what I would concur with is the fact that you should plan it, because an exit is going to happen, whether that's the ultimate exit from this planet, which ultimately as a byproduct you'll be exiting your business. It's much, much better to plan for this and appreciate that, yes, it's an inevitability that not everyone will whether they articulate it or otherwise, this journey isn't for everyone. So there are the right people at the right time, different stages, and it's you staying one step ahead of that and ensuring that you have the compassionate conversations with those who are certainly demonstrating that they're not, whether they've articulated it or not, they will certainly demonstrate it. And it's right and appropriate, back to the very outset of this conversation, doing the right thing. The right thing to do is to have that conversation. Yep. Sam, I always close the podcast, and I could have you on for hours here. It's sad that we now have to exit this conversation, but in the interest of wrapping up, as I always do, I mean, you've had this incredible scaling story. You're living a wonderfully rich, colorful life. Can you share with our listeners 3 timeless takeaways?
So I have to have the first timeless takeaway as that scaling principle, because it is so big for me. So always plan to double at a minimum, plan for 2 times, think 10 times. So just constantly think that bit bigger than you think you can. So that's sort of around the scaling piece, just constantly have that in the back of your mind. The second, which I think is so important, and I wish I had known earlier, is that everybody has been where you are at one stage. Everybody started somewhere. I give my great example of, Microsoft was a 16,000 revenue company in 1974. Took them 5 years to get to a couple of million turnover. They were in the same boat as we all were, going, is this going to work? Is it not? Scaling slowly. Then they hit the jackpot. So everybody is not better than you. They're just further along the line than you. So everybody has been where you were at the same point. We're all normal people. So I think that really helps me. And then I think my last one, which has become very important to me more recently, is if you don't write your story and make the effort to write the story and get out there and put your head above the parapet, someone else will write it for you. And I think I've always had a real issue with public speaking, and I've had to overcome it and go on course after course to get confidence to do it. And now I do it, and I actually don't mind it now. But if I hadn't written that story for me, because what I think is quite different to what a lot of other people think, what could have been written about me would be completely different. If you make the effort to write your story, no one else can rewrite that. So I just encourage every entrepreneur, you're very valuable. Everyone's been where you are, but get your story out there, because they're all so relevant. We need to hear every single entrepreneurial story to encourage every single other entrepreneur who's stuck where you are to go and do it. So it doesn't matter. We don't want to hear the big stories. We just want to hear the everyday stories of growth and difficulties and the vulnerabilities and the opennesses. So please write your story.
Oh, Here, and especially those female leaders out there.
Yes,
There's not enough of them,
especially.
and I'm so glad you leaned into the discomfort of those public speaking courses. I'm so glad that you shared your story, Sam. My day has certainly been enriched, and I'm more inspired by listening to you. And I have no doubt that the thousands of listeners that we have across the globe will be inspired by your story. So, on that note, if people want to find out a little bit more, where best to reach you, Sam?
So my new business is SuperScalers, which is www.superscalers.world. If you are an underrepresented founder with $1 million of revenue, you can sign up on there. And at the back of my book is my email, sam@thinkfair.world. I'm fairly open. People can get hold of me. I might not always reply. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I do a lot on LinkedIn. So find me as Sam Smith Entrepreneur on LinkedIn and Sam XS Smith on Instagram.
Sam, I want to thank you. This has just been a real masterclass. I've loved speaking with you today. Your experience is just so rich. Your wisdom is just so valuable. Thank you for bringing wonderful energy today to this conversation. I wish you every success in the journey that you're on. We're both on very, very similar journeys, so we'll pick up a conversation beyond this, but I'm wishing you, I want to take this opportunity to wish you every success. It's an incredible story, and a story still writing itself, so well done you.
Thank you so much.